Hi, I'm Jason Jasperson. Welcome to my studio.
This piece is 7.5 feet tall. It's divided into 4 pieces. There's a welded steel structure on the inside, followed by a skin of plaster dipped cheesecloth, and then a thicker skin of plaster that we can carve and sculpt and mold on the visible surface. What you'll see formally is a blocky top and a swirly bottom. The top is kind of a call out to a medieval Celtic cross. You see a stout cross on the top with kind of a circular band that I think was probably a practical concern. It made the original stone crosses from the 1100s stronger. And then there's a sculptural program within that stout cross. Descending from that cubic form, you see it start to turn and twist gradually in a long, lazy line. I want the base to kind of feel like it might be water, it might be tree roots, it might be smoke, it might be Gothic architecture. There's all sorts of right ways to interpret the way the base is shaped, and then that shape affords us places to put content. There's places for text and places for smaller sculptural images and programs. This is an idea that I've been working on for several years. I have iterations in my sketchbook. I have different attempts at trying to get at the Celtic cross idea, and then simultaneously trying to get at like a tree. And you see a tree kind of emerging in different ways in my portfolio. Some things I can't quite explain why they keep coming up, and but I find that things go well if I pay attention to those recurring urges, I guess. Like I need to explore this concept. It takes a long time to come to an elegant solution. I've experienced this over and over in my career, that having an idea doesn't necessarily mean that I'm ready to do it. And I get embarrassed about some of my early sketches. I feel good about them at the moment, but as I try again and I try again and I try again, I'm sort of standing on the shoulders of my previous tries, and I'm able to go further. Not long ago, I had the opportunity to walk the streets of Florence, Italy, and one of my favorite things to do there is to just kind of walk around the Duomo. It's just there. Anybody can walk around this amazing structure, and what you experience there, what I experience there, is I see generosity in that structure. I see that even though it was made in different phases 500, 600, 700 years ago, the people who worked on it were determined to express their priorities with their best work, their best materials, their greatest designs, and to make it publicly available. So I walk around this thing and I continue to benefit centuries later. It's like it's given off this radiation of generosity. It's just there, it's just beaming itself, as it has been constantly. So I think about that. I think, well, can we do that today? Do we do that today? So much of art nowadays is produced as sort of a transactional, momentary event whose purpose is to kind of like grab your attention, grab some money, funnel you towards a financial transaction. It's being used as sort of a means of manipulation. It's some kind of a net, creativity weaponized in a way. And that's not new. That seems like it's been happening for maybe forever. But there's a choice here, and I believe that art can be used in a transformational way. It can be used to help cause constructive thoughts inside of a person. More and more we live in a mediated era where we look at things through, it's like a game of telephone, there's different devices and decision makers between us and the thing that we look at. So for example, this is a video, right? There's going to be the camera and the microphones, and then there's going to be editing, and then there's the platform that you watch it on, and then there's the device that you happen to watch this on. All of these go relatively undetected nowadays. We just kind of accept that that's the way that you experience a work of art or a piece of architecture or a performance of some kind. I think there's a place for that, but I think there is also a place for unmediated experience. And while culture and technology move further and further into mediated experience, I want to be an advocate for the unmediated experience. So for example, this sculpture kind of confounds photography, and video would have to work pretty hard to reveal its secrets. The best way to look at this is in person. Now I know that not everybody can do that, but there are benefits to being somewhere and breathing the same air as a piece of art. If you think about the way a person writes, you think about handwriting just as an idea. Different people can write the same thing, right? Their words are the same. They could be copying something, but there is something special about the way that they write. For example, I got letters from my wife before we were married on a regular basis. Now, I would read those words for the words, but I would also look at the handwriting, right? And on that piece of paper, I realized she made those marks. She made them for me. There's the words, and then there's also the way that they're made. And there's something special about that connection with that other human. I think that idea transfers to the way that this sculpture operates. I count 37 other people working on this project so far. And every one of them has a particular way that they kind of can't avoid leaving their creative fingerprint in some way. I rather than wanting it to be standardized and unified, I'm charmed by the way that different people just can't help but be themselves. This sculpture captures the influence of all of those people in ways that I probably can't even detect myself, but it's baked into it. There's a humanness to this construction. The concept of AI is on people's minds, and it feels very threatening to a lot of artists for several reasons. They might be replaced, but also there's an extraction involved with AI. What AI does is it takes what exists, trains itself, and then recombines, and it puts out a new mix, a new remix of existing material. Well, that actually is a pretty good definition of human creativity. I tend to believe that originality might be a myth. Human originality might not exist, and that's part of the threat that we feel from AI, that maybe it's exposing that myth. But here's the other thing. I wonder if AI has an opinion, if it has a point of view. It is designed by humans. It is an expression of human intelligence. I believe humans are an expression of God's intelligence. And therefore, they can't be compared one to one. One will be greater than the other because the maker of one is greater than the maker of the other. We're impressed with AI right now because we used to be impressed with the special effects of Ghostbusters. We couldn't detect the hand that was animating. We weren't tuned in yet. And I think we're currently at a stage in AI where people are still catching up with what they're looking at. But there will be a time when it's laughable. That we just think it's lazy and kind of goofy. When I was in college, I learned about artists who had workshops. They had teams of artists throughout history and in contemporary art. And I was kind of a purist. I thought, that's cheating. I don't like that. I had in my mind that an artist is sort of a lone wolf, somebody who has a particular thing to say and a particular way to do it. And I would get upset about people who, sort of distributed the work. But as time went on, I started to see what could be done with a little compromise. I started to think about how in the world did a cathedral come to be in the Middle Ages or in the Renaissance. And gradually I've been developing and entertaining this idea that maybe like the way a movie is made, you can authorize different participants. You can help other people have a voice in your work. If you kind of allow them to do their thing. So that stance has been developing. I think of it kind of like, I keep coming back to the idea of a Gothic cathedral and the way that there's an anonymous quality to those builders And if you ever get the opportunity to look and walk around and experience a cathedral, say in one of the great capitals of Europe, you can make eye contact with the past. You can look at those workers, look at the work that they did, and see that this is a collection of individuals with different strengths. It's almost like you can look at their handwriting. People are given an assignment about what to make, but they have a particular fingerprint creatively on what they do. That now fascinates me. I think that's something I want to try to facilitate in my work. I try not to give you all the answers in the work, or even in my interpretation of the work. I would rather you own your experience. I would rather you explore it, you look longer, you look deeper, you think about the connections within the piece and the connections that the piece has with other pieces in the past, present, maybe the future. I've been returning to an idea of a pre-industrial paradigm. We're unconsciously affected by the past 150 years. It's just like it's in the air, and everybody's a product of their time. Every artwork is a product of its time. But at some point I feel like steering the times. I've tried to involve a lot of humans in this project, in my capacity as a professor, and in sort of just people that I know in my life. I've tried to find ways for them to participate in the project. And that could be done with different priorities in mind. You know, that could feel like taking advantage of people. I think of it more in terms of authorizing people, giving opportunity. I'm not anti-AI. I'm not anti-technology. I don't feel particularly threatened because it's not the first time we've had something like this. There was a printing press at one time that, you know, was fundamentally, drastically increasing the rate at which books could be produced. And there was photography that was fundamentally shifting the way humans made images. Well, you know, they're neither good nor bad. Those technologies are neither good nor bad. They can be used for all sorts of means, all sorts of purposes. And if you're smart, as an artist, you're going to try to figure out both directions. How can you take advantage of it, and how can you defy it? In the age of photography, the classic example is, in the age of photography, middle 1800s, artists were going crazy. They were thinking, oh no, for thousands of years, the making of an image, a portrait, a landscape, has been the provenance of a painter. Plato wrote about it, you know? And now a machine can do this in a second. So then the Impressionists look at this information. They look at this threat, and they do both. They defy it, and they take advantage of it. Edgar Degas worked from snapshots and produced compositions that the world's never seen before, where people are cropped. There's strange new sort of compositions that wouldn't have been done before a photographer or a camera allowed that to be seen. At the same time, defying photography, at the time it was all black and white, and You see artists leaning into color, bright, vibrant color, and you see artists leaning into their brush strokes. Claude Monet, soon Vincent van Gogh. You see artists doing the thing that the camera can't. So this is an important moment. It's an important technology. It remains to be seen how artists will amplify their work with AI and how they will defy it. This is old tech. I'm using mold making, which is a tried and true sculptural approach, and direct plaster sculpting. So the major form is a one of a kind. It's on a welded steel armature. I don't think I could do it again if I tried. I made the decisions along the way. I had drawings, I had measurements, but really it's sort of like this sort of poetic decision making along the way. It needs to stand, it needs to be strong, but I can make choices. And the plaster, it works the same way. I'm mixing up wet plaster and buttering it on and shaving it off and sanding it down and carving into it. Old tech, sharp tools, plaster and water. Mold making is also a part of this. Smaller sculptures and aspects of it I would rather work on at the bench and kind of develop it carefully, and then I'll work on that in clay, oil-based clay, so it doesn't dry, and then I'll make a rubber mold of that and I'll fill that mold with, I could fill it with plaster, but instead I'm filling with a white plastic because it's a stronger material that I think will blend in seamlessly with the whole piece. This piece is kind of intended to speak to future generations. And that's something I've been doing on several projects, kind of turning my attention, expanding the scope of my attention across years, decades, maybe centuries. I'm doing that in both directions on the timeline. I'm looking back 1,000 years stylistically, and there are stops along the way. I'm looking back to the beginning of time, content-wise, and I'm hoping that projects into the future. But I don't really have control over whether or not this has that effect. There's several factors in the future of this piece. One is it's made of plaster. Well, plaster is a reasonably sturdy material, but it is not an archivally strong material. It can break, it can chip, it can be scratched. It's not really resistant to the public. I had a sculpture teacher who told me, you have to make a piece that will resist the public. Steel, bronze, stone, and this is not that. But I can buy and use copious amounts of plaster for an affordable price. If somebody is interested in making this last longer, that can be done. It can be cast in bronze, and then, I think game over. It's pretty much set for centuries, unless somebody works very hard at cutting it up and melting it down. But I don't have the financial ability to make that happen. I read about pieces in books that are lost to time. There are photographs of sculptures that have been destroyed, and they'll never come back. You can't ever have that thing again. So I think this is one of those things. It's got a 50-50 chance of surviving the future. It could inspire a patron to make sure that it lasts.